From Toronto, this is JWeekly Canada. Tonight, culinary queen Rose Reisman and boxing expert Lou Eisen. From Studio 18, here is Susan Minuk.
We're here in the studio with Rose Reisman. Welcome.
There is no bigger culinary star in the Jewish world than Rose Reisman, a chef, teacher, host, author. Here are Rose and Susan.
And thank you for the book, The Best of Rose Reisman. I haven't seen this book, so I'm so glad you brought it. Tell us about it.
You know what, I have written 21 books, and I think I've finished writing cookbooks now, but it was, even when my kids were growing up, they said, Mom, why don't you put together all the recipes that we've been raised on and make changes? So I wrote that book, and it is probably my favorite book out of all of my books, because every recipe I love is in there.
Okay, so and the best of you.
The best, yeah, for children.
I'm excited to go
everything.
through it and make some recipes for my family.
Please
so thank you for that. So Rose, it's been said that the recipe for life is a balanced life. Can you give us some tips on how to achieve balance in our lives? It's
tough, let me tell you, to reach balance, and you're not going to have balance every day, so don't look for it every day, because there's no such thing as perfection. It's really just looking at, waking up in the morning, doing, if you can, doing what you love to do. In terms of my life, it's all oriented around health. So for me, it's about fitness, it's eating well, it's breaking bread with friends and family. I love it. I love cooking for crowds. And when you break bread and you eat with people, you get to know who they are. And I could look into my children's eyes every night at dinner and know what was going on in their lives.
I love that, and that's so true. I'll tell you one thing, when I cook for large groups of people, I think the biggest problem is timing the food so it's always warm, and that's always my biggest fear. Is that a thing?
That is a real thing, Susan.
Like how do you even?
So every Sunday night I have my entire family that's growing now, and there's 15 every Sunday night, and I got one who's gluten and dairy free, and every so I plan everything, and it is hard, but if you organize it earlier in the day, meaning I don't like to cook my food earlier in the day, it's not as fresh tasting. I have 2 ovens, which is a blessing, but you really have to do the timing. And while people are coming in, my husband has got some wine going and cheese and crackers, and he's kind of entertaining. Little kids are running through, and I'm there just oven 1, oven 2, timer this. And you try to do it as coolly as possible. You become better and better at it as you keep doing it.
So the key is to do it.
Do it.
Right.
You got it.
Okay, so Rose, why did you enter the health and wellness field?
Good question, Susan. My whole family was stricken with heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes type 2. So most of my immediate family members died in their 50s. So when I was in my 30s, they discovered high cholesterol. Now, I was working out like crazy. It didn't matter. I was slim, didn't matter. What I was putting in my body with the genetic component was killing me. And I realized, oh my God, they all died in the 50s, and I was in my 30s. And I didn't really understand what clean or fresh eating was. I knew you were supposed to eat salad, so slowly but surely, early 30s, I just educated myself on how to live better, how to eat better, and cholesterol went away on its own, which was wonderful. Until today, I just continue working out daily, and absolutely I cheat. You have to cheat, right? I love a day on a Sunday when my whole family comes. I eat like there's no tomorrow. I pay for it Monday morning and go back on track that week. So that's really the main impetus to why I eat well, and I raise my children to do the same.
And did you have a mentor to kind of guide you, or anyone give you some really good advice that pushed you?
You know what, I read a lot. I did see a nutritionist, and then I went back and became a registered dietitian. So I did that. I had 4 little kids at home, and I just did it. Well, you could actually do it online back then. It taught me a lot, and every day of my life now I'm constantly looking at what's new, what's trendy, what's healthful. For instance, coconut oil. Everybody was using it like crazy. Now they've gone back and said, you know what, it may not be as good for you as you think. So I'm constantly following the trends. It's a saturated fat. So we all know saturated fat like butter, ghee, animal fat, it clogs your arteries. Right. But they said something about coconut oil, that it has medium short chain acids that apparently bypass and don't clog your arteries. This is what they said 5 years ago. And today they're going back and saying, if there is a history of high cholesterol, you should cut back on your coconut oil. So this is a problem. You know, drink coffee, don't drink coffee, eat butter, don't eat butter. We're constantly doing this research, and that's where balance, as you said before,
Right.
balance really comes in.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning, Rose.
Yeah.
Where did your business begin, and when did you become a health lifestyle leader?
1993, I started writing light cookbooks. And I just decided, you know what, I was going to get this published. I didn't have a publisher then. I self-published on my own. And then I said, if I could hook up with a really good charitable organization through health, so I joined up with the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation. Now, knock wood, no one in my family has suffered breast cancer, but as you know, too many women have. So we just kind of hit the jackpot. I wrote a book called Rose Reisman Brings Home Light Cooking in 1993. We sold 750,000 copies in Canada and raised $1 million for breast cancer research.
Amazing.
So that not only made me happy, I mean, you know, in a business I did well, but I raised that much money for breast cancer. And I just said, hey guys, this is not a book about preventing breast cancer, because we don't know what causes breast cancer. But let's clean up our act. Let's live healthier. Maybe that will reduce the risk of any disease we have. So that's really where it started.
Very good. And you know, you do have a lot on your plate with your catering services and your kids' lunchbox program. Tell us about those. I'm familiar with your catering services. I love that.
So I now have, my name is still there. I have sold my business as of right before COVID, but we had Rose Reisman Catering, and we were the first caterers in Canada that said to corporate groups, law firms and accountants, I'm going to give you a great lunch, affordable, but it's going to be healthier. Why do you want to fatten up your staff? People really enjoyed that. So we took sample lunches down to all the law firms and business companies, and we ended up having over 200 clients back in probably 2014. And then I said, well, look at the lunches kids are getting. It's terrible. I would go into schools and see kids packed with 2 hot dogs from yesterday night, or there were some suppliers out there just packing them Kraft dinner. So we went into that, and we were producing 2,000 lunches a day for kids. And then we went into home delivery. So I developed a line of home delivery where you could either throw it together like HelloFresh yourself, or we would deliver breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks to you for weight loss, or just healthy living, or you know, gluten-free disorders.
And you offer these cottage boxes that are ready. They're just easy. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it was
really great.
Well, we had a big team. We had a lot of people in our catering operation. So, but I just love the ideas. I think that's what I'm probably best at.
And creative for sure. So it seems now as well, like I guess maybe in COVID more than ever, it exploded. These ordering apps where you can go and skip the dishes and Uber Eats and DoorDash. So it's very convenient. However, are we as Canadians consuming too much of the wrong foods?
I worry about ordering in meals all the time because restaurants are not advocates for your health. And we all know restaurants have way too much fat, way too much sodium. Diabetes is on the rise, high blood pressure is on the rise, obesity is still on the rise. And I think that's due to our culture of consistently eating out and making things happen instantly, as opposed to, you know, the other day I made my little grandkids sliders. You know, I do it easy. I took a big sheet pan like this, mixed up my ground beef, put it on there, cheese on top afterwards, cut it in like 12 sliders. So much healthier than
Do they watch
anything.
you do it?
They like to watch me do it, and
because that's an art in itself.
And they're critics. They're critics, little kids.
Okay.
But I mean, I taught my kids. Kraft dinner is there. Once one of my kids came in, they went, "Mom, Susan's got the best recipe for macaroni and cheese. You should get it." I said, "Okay, I'll call her."
Yeah.
It was Kraft dinner. So, so you know, kids love salt. They love sugar. They love fat. So we have to try to educate them, educate their taste buds to enjoy fresh.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It was lovely getting to know you and sharing all about Rose.
Thank you.
You're
You're delightful, Susan. Thank you.
When JWeekly Canada returns, Ieden Wall interviews boxing expert Lou Eisen. Welcome back to JWeekly Canada. From Studio 18, here is Ieden Wall.
And today a special guest. Now he's a stand-up comedian. He spent a lot of time on the stand-up stage. A wonderful act, crafted a wonderful act. Then he became an actor, now a boxing aficionado, a boxing expert.
Lou Eisen is one of Canada's most revered boxing experts, a comedian, actor, and now author. Here is Lou with Ieden.
Now you're known for your, it's encyclopedic, isn't it? It's meticulous, it's magisterial, it's an amazing knowledge of boxing. But tell me if I built that up a little bit too much.
Maybe just a tad, but I spoke years ago to Hank Kaplan, who was friends with Angelo Dundee, and Hank was the premier boxing historian in the world. And when I spoke to him, he said, "Kid, you know your boxing." So
it's great.
That was a great.
It's great to see you, Lou. You know,
you too.
I've wanted to talk to you for some time, and I'm glad you're here today. You know, we were talking on the phone, and I really enjoyed the conversation. And I want to start with, you know, the early part of your stand-up career. We were talking to Mark Breslin about this. Talk to me a little bit about the pain that propels one forward to create this larger-than-life persona.
Well, that's a great question. A lot of people look at that as a comedy cliche, but with me it wasn't. With me it was a real thing.
Yeah.
I was 5 when my mother died at 32. She died of cancer.
Right.
So I had an older sister, 5 years older, but my father had a catatonic nervous breakdown. So I lived with various families, and because of that, various relatives, I ended up going to different schools. And being the new guy at every school, you get picked on. And eventually I wouldn't go to class. I would just hide behind the doors.
I'm going to stop you, which I'm going to do. It's unconventional, but I can't contain myself. I love to jump in at certain times. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
So this is fascinating. So your dad has this breakdown, completely catatonic. How old are you?
I was 5 at the time.
So you're 5 at the time. What does a 5-year-old pick up on at that moment? You're not really emotionally formed, but a 5-year-old picks up on more than you might think.
Well,
What did you notice? First of all, what did you feel about your mom's passing? And what did you notice through the eyes, if you can put yourself into the eyes of the 5-year-old?
I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
I wondered why. I thought my mom was still coming home. It didn't occur to me till years later, till recently at the age of 62. That was the reason why, months before, she would say, "Just come and take a nap with your mom, lie down in bed with me." So I didn't know what was going on. I would try to talk to my father, wave my hand, and his brother, my Uncle Abe, said to him, "He can't hear you." And so I lived with different families, but my father recovered. My sister and I went back with him, but I was still very a melancholy child. And in order to help me, and to help me come out of myself and to cheer up, he started taking me to Marx Brothers movies. And I sat there and I fell in love with Groucho Marx because this was power. This was the guy who I learned later on that other comedians feared because he had such a mastery of the language. And so when I was 10 or 11, I wrote him a fan letter to California, and he sent one back and an autographed photo. And all I ever wanted to be from that time on was Groucho Marx. So when I went to Yuck Yucks to do stand-up, the comics would call me Little Groucho.
Let's talk about Lou, the real person, and then the stage persona, who was always pretty,
Angry.
Okay, so that's true. You know, I'm glad you mentioned that. Angry. Where'd the anger come from?
Anger, I guess, came from frustration at the way things are in the world, and saying that's enough. You know, I've had it. Comedy's about breaking taboos and upsetting people. Groucho Marx said, if you're not upsetting someone, you're not doing your job. So I had a friend of mine, as I mentioned to you, an overweight comic. He was making fun of himself. People wrote letters and complained. They said, you're not allowed to fat shame. He said, but I can certainly fat shame myself because I'm fat. I ate all the garbage. I'm fat. I can make fun of myself. And they said, no, you can't. It's offensive. So
how does one tackle this hyperbolic, politically correct world that we're living in?
You have to stick to your guns and do what you think is good for you. You have to stick to your guns and do the comedy that best suits you and what you feel is. You have to write to what you believe in, You have to be honest. It's the only honest art form.
Regardless of the outcome.
Right. You can't worry about what the audience is going to think because you're not there. If it pleases you, it will please them. You'll find your audience.
Okay, hang tight. We're going to take a commercial break. We'll be right back right after this.
You are watching JWeekly Canada. We'll be right back. You are watching JWeekly Canada.
Welcome back to Canadian Jewish Television, my friends. We're here with Lou Eisen, stand-up comedian, actor turned boxing aficionado. I'm amazed at your boxing knowledge. Now, when did you acquire this knowledge? Because on the phone, you were literally like an encyclopedia. People aren't lying about that. So when did this passion for boxing start?
After my mother passed away, I was watching a lot of TV, and I turned on the TV one day and I saw Muhammad Ali. I'm the greatest thing that ever lived. I'm pretty. I'm so pretty, I can't be beat. And I just fell in love with this person. And I got to meet him and got to know him and be able to call him a friend. So I was so fortunate to meet him. And I met him when I was 13, 14. I went to Maple Leaf Gardens, Angelo Dundee. This is a picture of us.
Let's show the picture, yeah.
From Cinderella Man. And
wow.
And the greatest trainer of all time, more world champions than anyone else. And so he had brought his fighter, Jose Napoles, the world welterweight champion, to fight the Canadian Clyde Gray. And so I waited after the fight, and I met Angelo, and he said to me, he whispered, he said, do you want to meet the big guy? And I said, wow. And he never called him Muhammad Ali, he called him the big guy. And Muhammad came out, and I'm only 12, 13. I look up, and I just start crying. And Muhammad said, remember, you got to brush your teeth, you got to stay in school, don't be a fool, and don't you ever do drugs. Drugs are for stupid people. And when Angelo said, do you box? And I said, yeah, I'm all right. He said, you can't be just all right, you have to be special, otherwise you get hurt. And he said, and if the size of your head is so big that other guys could hit you without leaving their corner, so it's better you don't box, it's better you write about it. And from then on, I watched hundreds of fights and read hundreds of books. I have my own book coming out soon, being published in the States.
What's it called?
Boxing's Greatest Controversies, Blunders, Blood Feuds, and Bad Decisions.
Cool, cool. We're running short on time. Let's talk about the pioneers in Jewish boxing, because correct me if I'm wrong, but in the early 1900s, we started to have some really tough Jews hit the boxing ring.
Right.
Guys that are still remembered to this day. We're going to bring up pictures while you talk about them. Let's mention your four favorite right now.
Well, I would have to say Benny Leonard was considered the greatest Jewish fighter of all time.
Why?
Because he had more skill and more talent and more brains. He held the undisputed lightweight title for 7 years. He worked originally at a gym called Krupp's Gym, and when he found out the owner was an anti-Semite, he said, I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to let you live. And he walked out and he went to Stillman's gym, and he took every Jewish boxer and non-Jewish boxer with him. And he, today, in 2023, now in June, is still rated as one of the top 3 or 4 greatest boxers ever to have lived.
Number two.
Number 2 is Barney Ross from Chicago.
Okay.
Barney Ross was a fantastic boxer. He beat Jimmy McLaren, who beat all the Jewish boxers. Ross was the first Jew and the first fighter to hold 3 world titles in 3 separate weight divisions. He was an all-time great. And during the War of Independence, he raised money from all the Jews he knew in boxing and in the mob, and sent millions of dollars to Israel.
Number 3.
Number 3 is my favorite, my father's favorite, Al Bummy Davis. Bummy Davis was the toughest Jew maybe that ever lived. He was incredibly tough. He knocked out a lot of guys. He had 2 brothers in the mob. He had an older brother, Willie, and a younger brother, Harry. Big gangy, little gangy. And the mob tried to intimidate him, and they threatened him, and he stood up to them. And there's a story associated with this. Around this time, 1940s, there was a rally in Madison Square Garden for the American Fascist Party, the Bund Party.
Yeah.
And when it was over, 10,000 of these neo-Nazi American fascists with their black armbands went into the Lower East Side, and they started to bump into Jews and break things. And the rabbi was so afraid, he called Mayor Lansky of the mob, and he called Meyer and he said, can you help us? And Meyer Lansky said, I'm a gentleman gambler. It's not what I do. And he kept calling, and to shut the rabbi up, he said, I'll send some guys over. The rabbi's waiting for a couple hundred guys. 3 guys show up, and he calls the rabbi, and he says, a rabbi calls him and says, Mr. Lansky, is this a joke? And he said, what time is it? He said, it's 10:30. By 10:35, the streets will be empty. And so the three guys were Louis Lepke, Buchhalter, who ran Murder Incorporated, Gura Shapiro, who they called Gura because he could never say get out of here, he'd say Gura here, and Ali TikTok Tannenbaum, serious Jews. And Gura Shapiro walked up to the head neo-Nazi who was standing on a carton, and he said, you guys got to go. And the guy made the mistake of spitting on him. So Gura Shapiro grabbed him, pulled him down, took a 10-inch piece of pipe, hit him on the head, split his head open, and when the other guys saw that, 10,000 neo-Nazis disappeared, literally, the police said, in under 2 minutes, like watching so many rats jump off a ship. So these guys were criminals, but they looked after their own.
Boxer number 4.
Boxer number 4, all-time greatest fighter, I would have to say Georgie Freedom Abrams, who Chris Dundee managed. He fought Ray Robinson. He beat him, but the mob gave the decision to Ray Robinson.
Tough Jews.
Yeah.
And it's inspiring in a way. Now, what's not maybe inspiring for our viewers is they had mob ties, most of them.
Right.
Why was that?
Because the mob controlled boxing.
Okay.
But there were some boxers, such as Al Davis and Georgie Abrams and Barney Ross, who stood up to the mob, who said, no, I'm not paying you that money, and I'm not afraid of you. Because to take away your numbers and your guns, you're nothing but cowards. And I'm more than happy to stand up against you.
Well, you come back. We got to continue
Absolutely.
this. I really enjoyed meeting
you. My pleasure.
Lou, it's a pleasure to have you on Canadian Jewish television.
You are watching JWeekly Canada. We'll be right back. JWeekly Canada is brought to you by Comfy Move. For your next move, please go to comfymove.ca. Key West Video. For your next commercial or corporate video, please go to keywestvideo.com. Melanie Lynn. For stylish women's clothing, please visit melanielynn.com. Barry's Office Furniture. For the most affordable office furniture, please visit barrysofficefurniture.com. One Extra. For all your captioning, translations, and location services, please go to oneextra.com. And Bagel World. For catering and events, please go to bagelworldtoronto.com. You have been watching JWeekly Canada. For more info, please go to jweekly.ca. See you next week.